Welcome to the Fat Emperor podcast. I'm your host, Ivor Cummins. Hey guys, we're back again with Shawn Baker MD, a surgeon who went carnivore several years ago. So many of you may have heard his interesting experience, but I'm going to check back in now because we haven't talked in a good while and see how things are going and what's the kind of political world of meat eating and, you know, environmentalism and the health effects he's seeing in all of his followers who have gone towards this style of life, and just generally find out what the lowdown is. So, Shawn, great to see you again.
Ivor, it's always good to see you again. Thank you, and look forward to having this chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think the last time maybe we met, we were at some big barbecue, a lot of meat. And I think I was in the back of the car with you and Dr. Paul Mason from Australia. I think you drew in my head or something. I fell asleep.
Paul did that, so.
It was Paul. Well, I have a perfect canvas to draw on, I'll have to say. It was a very rude thing that was drawn as well, but we needn't get into it here. So it was good fun.
It's nice to have some levity in these kind of non-funny times that we're going through, yeah.
Yeah, they were good times. We were all like packed into restaurants and all that. But anyway, we'll get back there hopefully. So yeah, I was thinking we go through the latest in the world of carnivore. I mean, I am meat biased because I believe there's enormous nutritional value in meat. Fatty meats are superfood like eggs and fish and many other things. I'm not full carnivore, but I tend towards just eating some vegetables and I try not to eat all the modern carbohydrate foods in as much as possible. But you're still, am I correct now, how long on pretty much pure carnivore?
Yeah, I'm about 4.5 years into this. I think I started end of 2016. So yeah, about right at 4.5 years. Still not dead, still don't have scurvy, still doing okay. Still haven't had a heart attack or any of those things that I've been told are going to happen. So we'll have to see.
And what about the blood markers? Because this, I remember the last couple of years, you had this kind of higher than you might expect glucose or A1C levels. But I keep pointing out to people that if you're on a standard American diet with high insulin and you've got high-ish blood glucose, that can be very ominous thing to see. But we repeatedly come up with people who go low insulin, ultra healthy, and yet the body, or through glucagon action or whatever, seems to top up the glucose a little higher than average or ideal for a SAD population. But it's actually done knowingly by the body to maintain glucose stores in the absence of exogenous glucose coming in. So what happened with that whole insulin glucose controversy with you around a year ago?
Yeah, well, I mean, my insulin has always been very, very low, which, makes sense. I mean, obviously you're using some insulin to dispose of protein and meat for sure, but it's been running low. I've kind of played with some of the experiments around this, and I started tracking my blood glucose a little more recently, a little more closely. And the interesting thing I found was exercise probably had the biggest impact on my glucose levels more than anything. And I found that right now, fasting insulin or glucoses tend to be fairly low, 80s. Like this morning, I woke up, it was 66. Yesterday, it was 55. And so, but I found the way meal timing and timing of exercise and some of the other things had a pretty huge impact on that, more so than, just what I was eating. Well, I mean, I wasn't changing what I was eating, but I found that I could change that pretty much at will, based upon, how and when I exercise. And what I was doing before was early morning, super high intense exercise. And I think there was an anticipatory response. I mean, you have this kind of arousal phase when you get ready to exercise and your body starts to produce what it needs to. I think that was just what I was training myself to do. And since I've changed that up, it's been a little different. Yeah, but my insulin's been very, very low. Last time I measured it, I think it was under 2. So pretty low there. And so, I've got, no evidence of any deleterious effects from blood glucose elevation, whatever it was years ago. And I mean, to be truthful, probably prior to starting this carnivore diet, I probably was pre-diabetic. I mean, just in retrospect, I had the skin tags. I was heavier than I was, I was, eating massive amount of food. And so I think maybe my physiology leaned toward that, where maybe I was more glucagon predominant, and that maybe is part of who I am. But right now it seems to be going quite well.
No, that's great to hear because again, I'm a bit out of touch over the last year, and so I didn't know where that thing had gone. But yeah, we've also seen that ultra low carb athletes, they can have enormous particle numbers, LDL particle counts, and they rise right up naturally, physiologically. But we can never confuse a super fit athlete having a high running glucose or a high running LDL particle count, which in the general sad eating, unhealthy population, that's a poor indicator. But that all depends on the context. In a super fit, low carb athlete, a very high particle number can be exactly where the machine wants to run. So it's great to hear that. And the people following you now, you've obviously got a much bigger following over the years. Are there any or many adverse kind of feedbacks from people who have gone carnivore? There's always going to be a small percentage where it doesn't quite fit, but is it overwhelmingly positive still? Like last time I checked, the occasional person doesn't find it so perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think the outcomes have been generally good. I think most people, and I would say the vast majority of people, find that things get better from their health, whether it's weight loss, whether it's improvements in, diabetes, whether it's blood pressure issues, whether it's gut issues. I mean, it goes on and on, almost like I hate to call it a panacea, but it almost seems to be. I think a good diet is kind of a panacea. So I won't, I don't think that's too controversial. But I mean, there's certainly some people where they find it being, completely eliminating plants for them just doesn't work as well. And I would say that the vast majority of people that come to this, first of all, they figure out that meat is not bad for them. And I think that's an important thing to realize. And then many of them remain, 90% on the diet, where 90% of their food's coming from animal products. And then they'll include, some fruit here and there, a bit of chocolate here and there, a glass of wine or something like that. To be honest, I really appreciate, I'll have a glass of wine once in a while, but not that often, the negative outcomes. I mean, I've seen some people have gotten, the standard illnesses. I don't think it's something that's going to make you bulletproof. I mean, but certainly no higher than the average population. I think I would put up the results of this community against the general population any day of the week, and I think the outcomes would be far improved. I want to, just going back to the low carb athletes, we don't have a big, the context you talk about. We don't have a huge data set on what's going on with those people, and I think that's an important thing to realize, that context is, incredibly important when it comes to this. And I think, the elevated LDL particle count in absence of verifiable cardiovascular disease is an interesting phenomenon, which I know is still being, looked at and wondered about, and hopefully we'll get more data on that.
Yeah, and actually, I remember a year or two ago, another paper from Professor Volek, and perhaps Finney was on it, and I can't remember the exact title from memory, but it was something around the paradox of high LDL particle in ultra fit endurance athletes. And they did the study, and they found this preponderance, but then, of course, they went through all the other metabolic markers and all the science, and they kind of said, look, they couldn't say it outright that it doesn't matter, obviously. It's political also. But they kind of said in a roundabout way, hey, this kind of shows that high particle count doesn't have to necessarily be a problem at all. But yeah, that was it. The health benefits, I interviewed, I think it was, Paul Saladino MD, good pal of mine, a few months ago. And we went through all of the data and science and research indicating that meat was maybe unhealthy. And even though I knew a lot of it already, as he went through it and pulled up paper after paper, I just realized the extent to which the message that meat in any way is problematic is essentially completely false scientifically. Whatever about carnivore being better, significantly, I mean, there is no credible evidence for meat being a problem in a species that evolved, it's accepted broadly, through eating of meat and marrow and organs from scavenging right up to now. We're the biggest hunters on the planet. So is there any evidence that anyone's presented in the last year or two that's in any way changed that view, that you think, okay, that's pretty credible science that suggests there may be a problem?
I haven't seen any real science. I mean, you continue to see the epidemiologic studies that come out there with the association, which is basically I mean, you might as well look at astrology if you're going to look at that stuff. But I mean, it's, I mean, I think if anything, I've seen kind of more evidence coming out to support that. You saw Journal of American College of Cardiology came out, 2020. Saturated fat from red meat and other whole food sources is not a problem. We've seen Mickey Bendora's paper, and I forget his co-author's name, but just looking at the evolution of humans, 2 million years of meat eating, recently switching about 80,000 years ago to a more, adding plants in, but most of our evolutionary time was spent, eating a lot of meat in perhaps a heavily carnivorous fashion. Nutrex study came out again 2019. Obviously, that was widely criticized, particularly by the plant-based folks. Neil Bernard and the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine petitioning the FTC to have the Annals of Internal Medicine retract their papers. I mean, it's just, it's certainly, you see that there's just a pretty significant agenda against this. But I have not seen anything. There's, processed meat seems to be one of the ones that kind of goes back and forth. Some studies will sort of exonerate it, where other studies will continue to demonize it. And the question is, what is it processed with? And it's not just straight up meat. So I've not seen anything that's going to, at this point, has conclusively shown that meat is a problem. We see the TMAO stuff, which people keep pointing to, which is, it's kind of farcical to see how they try to interpret that as to blame meat for ills of society or cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, and the TMAO is just, I think someone said TMAO, LMAO, or laugh my ass off. It's such a farce. I gave a brief 2 minutes to Dave Feldman when I was in a debate with Joel Kahn, the vegan cardiologist. Now, Joel, I actually like Joel, and he's a great proponent of calcium scanning and everything else, but he has strong ideology to veganism, and therefore it does bias him. So the TMAO, I just threw out 2 papers. It took me all of 10 minutes to debunk that one. And one of them was that when you have kidney function problems, usually by insulin resistance, your TMAO blood level goes right up. And they showed in transplant people that when they swapped the kidney, immediately the TMAO came down with no change in diet. So the TMAO was clearly a marker of the problems of insulin resistance and other issues that correlated with heart disease. But it wasn't a causal vector. And the other one was they got middle-aged women, postmenopausal, I think, and they did the most fantastic experiment. I loved it. For 6 to 7 months, they fed them so much taurine and I think something else that they brought their blood level of TMAO up by a factor of 10 for most of the 6 months. Now, can you imagine you smoked your guts out for 6 months, so you had 10 times the toxins? You'd see a response in inflammatory markers and stuff. You'd see some blood response to this assault on your physiology. But guess what happened? Their cholesterol, their blood markers, a whole range of advanced inflammatory markers, everything didn't move an iota. There was no trace of advanced tests on the blood to show any indication of a change in vascular risk at all. And that was 10x the TMAO maintained for 6 months. So I could go on, but the TMAO is farcical and it's clearly political. I mean, it's just so clearly political. And speaking of political, I noticed with this COVID hysteria worldwide, which obviously we won't get into it here, but there's very worrying things I've been watching, like passports for mandatory medications that make zero sense, giving the risk profiles, and all this crazy lockdown stuff. But also I'm seeing, it's almost on the back of this, a climate agenda is on the back of it about flights and travel. And also an anti-meat agenda is resurging with a lot of these groups and players, World Economic Forum, Eat Lancet. There's all this media bubbling up of, this is a warning now for us to reduce meat. Huh? A lab-created virus is a warning to reduce meat? What do you think?
Well, obviously first of all, I'm not supportive of, lack of informed consent or medical freedom. I mean, if people want to force you to take a medication, there should be a better reason than what we have now. I'm just, I've seen some, when I was in medical school, I remember watching someone being forced medicated for psychiatric meds, but you had to go to court to mandate, you had to bring them to court and conduct basically a hearing to do that. And we're sort of bypassing that process completely. But yeah, I mean, I've seen things, I think maybe in the UK where they were asking people to test their chickens for COVID. And if the chickens came back positive, we're going to slaughter the chickens or something, do something. And, we see the vegan advocates saying, there'd be no such thing as pandemics or illnesses if we didn't eat animals, which is just nonsense on its face. I mean, unless you're going to, rid the world of even wild animals too. I mean, it's just kind of insanity. But yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that there will be people trying to use COVID as a reason to try to ban meat. I mean, any environmental or any issue that all happens, whether it's fires in the Amazon or COVID or anything, they're going to try to blame it on meat. It's just like the universal scapegoat, which, I think is just, we have an industry that's going to benefit, the processed food industry, the cheap food industry, with the pharmaceutical industry, secondary benefits from that, just wants to make, continue to make more money with that stuff. And I think this is where this anti-meat rhetoric is largely originating from or getting its legs from. And I find it to be, obviously disturbing. Hopefully enough people are smart enough, and we wonder, you wonder about the critical thinking skills of the sort of the mass of humanity. And sometimes I'm a little doubtful of that based on recent events.
Yeah, and I think the only thing in the people's defense, and it's the same in Ireland, we have 70% of people now, I think, effectively psychosed. They are orders of magnitude out on the actual mortality impact of this unfortunate virus. Orders of magnitude out. If you ask them, it's incredible. But the only defense for them, in fairness, is we've had 24-hour propaganda from state media outlets and many other ones for nearly a whole year. And studies have been done showing if you can push fear and propaganda at a population for more than 4 or 5 weeks, they essentially won't be able to see their way out of it. Their critical thinking begins to get blunted. And these guys have had a year of it. So I guess you could forgive them somewhat. But yeah, the opportunism is incredible. And we're seeing the same characters who are pushing mass medication, who are pushing control and against consent. They're also pushing fake meat, which is kind of a coincidence maybe, but it's a pretty strong one. I did some work on the fake meat beyond burgers and these things. And there's around 15 or 17 ingredients in each, and guar, gum, and this extract, and they're basically ultra processed food. They're aiming to give you what meat has, but even then they don't have the heme iron. They have vegetable based iron, so it's not the same. But if you put real meat, is simply real healthy evolutionary human meat. That's the ingredient list. These things have 18 or 20, and they're made from monocrops generally, which have their own environmental problems, and they're made in essentially industrial processed food type setups. It just makes no sense to me to replace something that could be regeneratively farmed. If they want to help with meat agriculture, they can do it easily. We can start tomorrow with more regenerative farming processes and recycling and, carbon sequestering practices. You could easily do that. But no, they don't want to improve the so-called emissions. They just want to replace real food and real meat with processed food, right?
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting studies that came out, this guy named Stefan Van Vliet out of Duke University, works at another club named Fred Provenza, and they looked at, they compared, I can't remember if it was Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat, and they compared it, they did a very detailed nutriomic analysis on the fake meat and the real meat. And they looked at something like 2,000 individual compounds. It's more than just protein and fat and a few vitamins and minerals. There's thousands and thousands. Beef has something like 55,000 compounds in it, most of which we have no idea what it does yet. And they only saw about a 10% correlation that beef is 90% different than these fake burgers, with the numbers of compounds. What effects they have on the human body, we don't know. I mean, we're just discovering things like the effects of choline on neurological development. This is something that's not been talked about a lot over years. I mean, we vitamin B12, when we go on a plant-based diet, those things have been well known, vitamin D, vitamin, K and things like that. But more and more compounds, taurine, carnitine, these things that are conditionally essential are being left out. And so we have this, obviously it's processed food, obviously it's from a degenerative type of agricultural system. I mean, Beyond Meat is outsourcing its soy production to China, who arguably doesn't have the most environmentally friendly, sustainable practices when it comes to ranching. And you're absolutely, I just got done interviewing a filmmaker who's done Carbon Cowboys about this, Eat Meat, Save the Planet, regenerative agriculture. And you're absolutely right. We certainly can utilize meat production in a way that is not only less destructive to the planet, but actually improves our planet. And I think that's where we hopefully will go and need to go, and more people need to know about that.
Yeah, and I must actually, I'll get some of those details and post them down below afterwards from you, some of those links. But there's some great stuff out there around this and the environmental impacts and the whole problem with this whole sphere and the political elements of it. And choline, you just mentioned choline. It reminds me, I think it was George Henderson perhaps, or in New Zealand, who had rat studies sent to me years ago on choline deficiency and liver disease. And like, if you're choline deficient, you get all these myriad range of problems. But if you're choline replete, then you could take all these toxins and have no effect at all. And like, no one even talks about choline. But on the meat, including, yeah, I'm going to run an advert of sorts at the end of this for my buddy Warren in New Zealand. I had an idea that he's got a nutraceutical factory the last 20 years, top-end FDA approved, regulated nutraceuticals. But I had the idea with him, since I befriended him years ago, to do organ meat supplements. Now, I know there's some already on the market, but I knew he could do New Zealand sheep. Literally, they're all around Christchurch, where his manufacturing facility is. And he got the best quality. Now, there's a question, organ meats. So I believe, and I try and eat them as much as possible, though now I've got this supplement, obviously. You would think that just eating the fatty meat, the muscle meat, the meat cuts, if you have a clean diet and you're not eating other crap, that will largely give you all of these thousands of components and everything you really need. That'd be your general belief, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what I've seen from enough people, and we've got data on about 10,000 plus people individually that I've tracked. Harvard University has a couple thousand people, and I think, again, and I mentioned this before, I think it can be individualized, and some people certainly will tell me they feel much better, do better, correct problems by addition of organ meats, but that doesn't seem to be universal. And so I don't make universal recommendations and stuff. I just don't have data that I can make that stance. Now, I think there's a lot of good reasons to eat organ meats. I will sometimes eat them if someone else prepares them for me. I don't go out on my way to do it. But yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly a potential benefit there. Is it necessary for all people? I'm not in a position to say that based on what I've seen so far, though. So, but certainly, I've seen enough people say that it benefits them, that I don't think there's a harm in that. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I mean, if you're fully replete and extremely fit and healthy and eating a super clean diet, you may be able to maintain everything even without those evolutionary kind of marrows and brains and heart and CoQ10 and all that stuff that comes with them. And then for people maybe who aren't willing to cook them and who are maybe not eating a perfect or an ultra carnivore diet, then for people who have the means, that's a very convenient way to get all of these peptides and thousands of components, B12 and iron and all these different things that are in there in an easy way. But again, it's only for people who have the means, because of course, it's always going to be cheaper to buy the liver and the kidneys. So you can go, we always say, go and cook your own, and you should do. I have kidneys with cream. There's a restaurant, sadly closed now for the last bloody year in Ireland because of lockdowns. But they do lamb's kidneys in cream, and it's actually very tasty. Now, there's still the faint hint of piss, of kidneys. Do you ever eat kidneys?
I've had it a few times, and it's not been my favorite. I mean, certainly bone marrow. I don't, bone marrow technically is an organ, I suppose, and I love that. That's delicious. And I've had brain, and I've had kidney, and I've had liver, and I've had sweetbreads, and I've had even testicle. I mean, I've tried it all, and I just haven't found one that just knocks my socks off as saying I must have that. But I think, your point about, I'm talking from this perspective of being on a carnivorous diet, but there's a lot of people that eat just a pretty poor diet, and this probably would be a good addition to their diets, whether it's organ meats or, perhaps the supplements, and I think and the other point you make about being clean, fit, and healthy, and I try to do that in my own life, but there are stressful things. You get illnesses, injuries. In those situations, you might see an additional requirement that goes up. So there may be different times where things can be beneficial.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember I went to Hungary a couple of years ago and I had a great visit with Paleo Medicina. You've probably come across them, have you, maybe?
Yeah, I've interviewed Sofia and Chava several times, so certainly I'm familiar with their work. And I was going to go to Hungary last year, but as things are, didn't get to go anywhere. So much of the traveling got shut down because of the COVID stuff.
Yeah, I know it's been crazy, but yeah, I mean, meeting those guys there at their conference, and they obviously have a huge belief in the organ meat specifically. So what Paleolithic ketogenic has to be low carb, it has to be animal based, especially if you've got a condition, and they've got the extra thing that you have to have all the nutrients from organ meats. But again, very hard to get, in fairness, actual randomized control trials and actual hardcore proofs of the benefits of these things, because who's going to fund it, right? They're all off funding Beyond Burger and that nonsense. So here we are. So I'm conscious, Shawn, you're moving house at the moment, I think.
Yes, we are. They're upstairs destroying my house right now. We're renovating the bathroom so we can put it on the market, but we've already got a place to move into. We won't be able to occupy it till June once my son gets out of school. So we're actually sleeping in a hotel right now while trying to work in the house that still remains during the day, and that'll go on for a few more months. So it'll be a fun rest of the spring for us.
Yeah, well, great stuff. New starts, fresh starts. And I'm just conscious of your time, and I really appreciate you making this. Any last thoughts on the whole carnivore sphere or anything else, actually, as we wrap it up and give you back your day?
Well, I think that, one thing that I've been very excited about, and you mentioned about strict carnivore, and one of the things we're doing at MeatRx is, the place that I hang out at, is we're going to be looking at, the different individuals and trying to perhaps add machine learning into solving how people, gathering data and applying machine learning models to that to figure out who can benefit from different additions to the diet or subtractions to that, try to refine it further. And that's something that we're also, as you mentioned, we're also raising funds. We've got several $100,000 raised for a large interventional study with this. So we're going to be adding to the science. So that's something I'm excited about, and been very happy that, the nice things, we had so many people that benefited from the diet that they want to fund it to see the science go forward, which I think is really, really nice.
Yeah, I didn't know about any of that, actually. As I said at the start, I'm a bit out of touch, but that's excellent. MeatRx.com, I remember. I signed up to it way back. And it's simple to remember for people. MeatRx, that's it. And also hashtag #MeatHeals and hashtag #yes2meat. These are good hashtags to use when discussing these things. And a few $100,000, that's pretty good. I know studies cost millions, but to crowdsource, it's very hard. So a few $100K will do some pretty nice work. And it's a bit like Dave Feldman's been doing with the cholesterol. I think he's raised a significant amount of money over the last few years to do genuine studies.
Yeah, that's our goal. Our goal is to not just, talk about it, but demonstrate it. I think it's important to put your money where your mouth is and back it up. And that's my plan. So.
Yeah, well, you're certainly backing it up with your physique, your fitness, and your overall health, which is a testimony to the power of ancestral meat. So, great stuff, Shawn, and we'll circle back in a while and see how those studies are going.
Awesome. Thank you, Ivor.
Thank you, Shawn. Talk soon. Hey, guys and gals. Hope you enjoyed that discussion. And now I'm going to tell you a brief New Zealand story. So, I'd never been there until November of last year, and it's an incredible country. It's also a country where they have the best grass-fed sheep in the world. And those sheep also have highly nutrient-dense organ meats. So the reason I was in New Zealand is because of my new buddy, Warren Matthews, who contacted me last October, and he wanted to know how he could better design and produce products that would help people with prevention of calcification and heart disease. So he actually wanted to come over all the way to Ireland. That's 36 hours, 3 flights, to meet with me. And I said, well, okay then, but no promises. And he arrived, and we spent several days in meetings, discussions, meeting of minds, and also went out for a couple of great meals with my family. So, long story short, he wanted me to come over and see his place in New Zealand. So I went over and met with him and his wife, and I got to tour his purpose-built facility that he built 10 years ago. He's the owner and CEO of a nutraceutical manufacturing plant. Because I spent 6 years in FDA-regulated medical device manufacture and another 20 in high-volume products, I was fascinated to go through all of his processes and check them out. So they have state-of-the-art clean rooms. They're fully regulated FDA and all the other bodies. All throughout, spick and span, modern equipment, perfect facilities for high-quality manufacture. Everything double weighed, double counted, double checked all the way through. So a really tight ship. They also have some of the best equipment that's available, like 3D blending, robotic and computer controlled. And they have, of course, processes for encapsulation and microencapsulation to protect the products so they actually reach their target rather than being degraded by stomach acids, etc. So everything covered. But let's get back to where we started the story. So I indeed gave Warren a lot of advice on various aspects of products best for heart disease, but I also gave him an idea. I said organ meats are a passion of mine. I eat them, my family eats them. The kids aren't so fantastic, to be honest. But what if he could produce a supplement made directly from the best organ meats in the world, i.e. New Zealand sheep organs? He's in Christchurch in New Zealand, right in the middle of sheep country, and there were multiple suppliers. The best was procured, and he went through all the development process to get the perfect organ meat supplement produced. So it took many months, and now it's actually available, and of course I can give you guys a discount. Warren suggested it was only fair, after I was the inspiration, that I could extend to my followers a 15% off offer. And you can see the code there, IVER15, and the link to the website will be in the description below. And this will help me keep things going here. It'll support me in a small way, but primarily give you that discount. So I don't generally promote products, as you well know, but in this case, the personal relationship and the hand I had in developing it, and also my complete confidence in the ultra high quality of this, enables me to do this for you guys. Please share and make people aware that the best product in the organ meat world is now available. It ships all over the world. You know you're getting the best possible alternative to finding those organ meats and cooking them yourselves. By all means, if you can, it is ideal to make these part of your daily diet. But for a lot of people, as we explained, that won't be practical, or they won't really sustain the habit. And therefore, this is a perfect product for those people.